My sources have always been my fears and my anger. I've always maintained that everything is subject for photography, but I'm very introspective and liking language. It all came together. And also, I didn't go to photography school, which was my great savings, because they have to teach you something in photography schools. And they usually teach you rules, their rules. And so then you have to unlearn all of that before you can free yourself from your expensive education. I like challenge. I like having to make something from nothing. And isn't that art, making something from nothing? I'm fascinated by the nature of thinking. I've always been very curious about everything, and that goes with the territory. The curiosity leads you to asking questions. I've always said that my basic feeling is not what does something look like, but what does it feel like? So that demands a whole other part of your brain to solve that problem. I never walk around with the camera. I never did. Dreams, reveries, that's exactly where I come from. And again, it's a package. It comes out of the curiosity. I like adventure. I like solving problems. I like doing what I've never done before. I've done so many different things. I did a book on Egypt. I did a children's book. I did a book about quantum, 2 books on Kafafi, a book on Walt Whitman, and a book about my Army days. I'm not a one-trick pony. I'm always challenged. And I like seeing what I've never seen before. People have been the subject, and we experience life through other people. It's always been about people, and that's all I know. Being a people myself, that's the only reference I have. Everything else is background. Everything else is stage set for our little drama. You know, New York is this room is a stage set for my drama, and it is a drama. People are not what they appear to be. When you do a portrait, you have to bring insight into the picture, or else it's just description. People assume their portrait. When I worked with Magritte, I worked in the manner of Magritte. I don't do 2 portraits the same. Most portraitists have a style. I think you have to take a portrait in the manner of the subject. I have 3 kinds of portraits. 4. The first one is called Stand and Stare. And this is Stand and Stare. It's the coin of the realm. And everybody takes it, and it's the most legitimate way, the universal, ubiquitous portrait. Everybody does. But I don't believe Stand and Stares. I believe in a prose portrait is a portrait that tells a story about the person. So all the Magritte portraits with him at the easel, where he looks like one of his own paintings, that's very much in the manner of Magritte. So that brings a little more insight into somebody. And there's another portrait which I have, and I call that the annotated portrait. And underneath the portrait, I would make a few comments about the sitter. So it's always a problem of how do I transcend appearances? And that brings me to the imaginary portrait. And those are portraits of people that don't exist, or I've been painting on tintypes, or, you know, just inventing somebody who really wasn't there. I did this close-up of her face, and she's holding her glasses. And I'm looking at her through her glasses, so you see the small image. Of course, she's a photographer. She uses her eyes. It's all about vision and sight. It's very, very basic. And I like the way she looks. I would describe her as being plain, but she has a wonderful authority. It's a very elegant plainness. I like to photograph women who are not conventionally pretty. They have their own beauty. They define themselves in a whole private way. Vogue asked me to do the 10 Ages of Man with Robin Williams doing all 10 ages. This was early in the career, post Mork and Mindy, I think. And when he came in with an assistant, and he had a large suitcase, and nothing was said. So finally, at the bottom he pulled out a pair of sneakers. And I said to Mr. Williams, do you mind if I smelled your sneakers? And he broke up. And then it was just hell's a-poppin'. It was just joke, giggle. I always regretted I never photographed myself with all these different people. But in this case, I did. We got along so well. It's a prose portrait. He was doing what Robin Williams does. I think that the photographer should intrude into the picture and not just be this passive observer of somebody else's life, somebody else's accidents. The photographs are theatrical. They're little mini dramas. They're all set up. Everything I do is theatrical. I've almost never found something that I used. I've always invented everything, and every invention is a kind of theater. This is theater. Life is a theater. I am a storyteller. I'm a storyteller, and that's what I do. I'm very verbal, and I have lots of ideas. I could do 10 minutes on anybody or anything. The photographs are in the service of stories. Essentially, it's the story, and our lives are stories, you know. You could do a drama of two men passing each other going down the street that could be fraught with emotion, suggestion, terror. You don't need to do these huge things. The slightest thing, poetry is in the slightest gesture. It's not about production qualities. Sequence has freed me. Everything I've done in photography has freed me. Writing has freed me from the confines of walking down the street with my little black box looking for reality, which is the paradigm of photography. Sequences gave me a vehicle to subvert reality, to question reality. Things are queer. Questions. You see a picture of a man, a giant foot in a bathroom, and it makes no sense at all. Something's wrong. And then the next picture tells you, you were right. It really was a man standing in a window of a store. No, and then you say, no, that wasn't right either, because it's actually in a book. It's a man. So rather than telling you what you already know yet again, I contradict you, you know. And it gives photographers a wonderful vehicle to play with people's observations, but they never do. They simply tell snow is white and it's pretty and whatever. So I suddenly had a vehicle to do things. And Alice's mirror, it was about that, looking into a mirror, and then the mirror you see is not the mirror you thought it was, because it's a reflection in another mirror, and it ends up being reflection in another mirror, and eventually it's a man holding a hand mirror, and then he just breaks the mirror, and the whole thing vanishes, the reality vanishes. So that's reflection of a reflection within a reflection. It's an invention. But it brings a lot of questions. If you think about anything, it makes you ask, why is one picture more real than the other one? And right now, this thing we call reality, or we a reflection in another larger reality? Probably so. The real source of Paradise for Gain was Henri Rousseau, and the people in the jungle, the lady on the sofa, the tigers in the woods, and then there's Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who believed that man was essentially good, and it was society that would corrupt. I love Rousseau. All my sources are artists. My heroes are Magritte, de Chirico, and Valters. All of them. I've never taken anything from any photographer. And that's a very, very early sequence. It's about loss of innocence, our true nature. Why don't we just photograph it? You want to do a portrait? Photograph people in the nude. That's what they really look like. You know, it's not just, we focus on the face, but why doesn't the body tell you a lot about the person as well? I think that's an interesting idea. I do have a long time fascination with the spiritual. I think essentially we're the energy. And I have a man in the 14th Street subway, and very slowly, as a train pulls in, he begins to vanish into light. There's a little clock in the subway that has a light. And if you watch what happens, it becomes a little constellation, which is one of the little photographic perks, which I liked. And then very slowly he becomes it turns out to be Andromeda. And the bottom line is we're all stars, we just don't know it. That's the heart of what I guess I try to say. Our true nature is to be the energy, and the energy is, the Buddhists say our true nature is a clearness. And this clearness, which we can't describe, believes what it experiences. So my clearness, I'm in my Duane suit. This is the 1932 model. They're recalling this year. You see, I find pictures like Gursky's, they shout at you. My pictures whisper. I'm telling secrets. I find size a dodge. It's the last refuge of the scoundrel when you have nothing else to say. My signature is an intimate skill. It's like reading somebody's diary. And I love my handwriting, and I love when I make mistakes. I don't want the work to be perfect. If I don't manufacture mistakes, but if I do, I leave them in. I want the work to be flawed. Poetry is flawed. Poetry does not come out of perfection. It comes out of where you hurt. It comes out of what you miss. The most brilliant thing about camera and memory is that which I can't remember, I can still remember when I look at a photograph. The great power of photography is to evoke and validate memory. It still holds on that long after you've forgotten the color of her hair or the sound of his voice, you still have that little piece of film. All of my work eventually comes out of memory. It comes out of a poem I read. It came out of something that touched me a long time ago. I've always thought about death. Death has been a singular obsession with me, but obsession is something that you keep coming back to. You can never solve. Death, I'll never figure it out. Now, when Grandpa goes to heaven, I photographed in the country where we live upstate, and there's an old hotel there, the Cambridge Hotel that I use. That's Lyman White. He's a very liberal, wonderful farmer, and he was my favorite model. He was always my old man model. And I photographed the hotel with this little boy, and he sees his grandfather dead in bed, and then the grandfather sits up and he has wings, and he stands up and he glows and he waves to the little boy, and he goes out the window, and then the little boy goes to the window and waves goodbye to him. And when Lyman died, and they showed this to the children, that made it okay, because they literally saw their grandpa going to heaven. Not knowing what I was doing, still not knowing what I'm doing. I'd like to have thought by the time I was 83, I would have figured something out, and I haven't. Delicious, delightful, delirious, the lovely Duane.